Max Verstappen is a phenomenon, but how does he make the RB19 so much faster than his teammate? The RB19 so much faster with his driving style, and why no teammate has ever really been competitive with him in the last couple of years. His driving style is unique to his own, but there are things that he does with the car that nobody else can, and he drives it in a way that is super effective on both its tires, but also taking a lot of speed in slow speed corners, which other drivers on the grid aren't able to extract. Max, since joining Red Bull all the way back in 2015, has always had this particular style and drove in this type of manner. But now with how the cars are made and how this RB19 is essentially made around how quick he is, it shows off just even more how his adaptable but beautiful oversteer style has taken him to new levels and has given him crazy laps or even races to where he's catching people at phenomenal rates and putting in fastest laps by almost 1.5 seconds in some races. And yes, while this does have to do somewhat with RB19 being super stable, you don't see his teammate on the other side ever putting 1.5 or dunking it on anybody's head. It is Max Verstappen making that difference with the car that he is given. Let me explain where he's gaining all of this time. Well, throughout the season, he has had major performances. Some notable ones where I find his driving style so insane and how fast he really is. Zandvoort in the wet. He was a whole pit stop behind on Perez. And I'm talking about he was like 20 seconds behind. He gained in 3 laps, 12 seconds. It was an insane amount of time that he found in the rain because he was finding the grip, but also to the driving style that he was using. It was just working well for him. In a actual interview, a quote that I love how he says and how he talks about driving styles in general. He talks about really understeer in a car. He says, "I never experienced a fast car which was understeer, turning less sharply than desired in my life in any category." He said, "I feel like if people ask me what is your driving style, I cannot tell you because I always adapt what I get in the best way possible." He does have a somewhat distinct driving style. His driving style is most similar to Michael Schumacher and Senna, only because they all drive with oversteer. But what he's doing in the corners, and particularly slow speed corners and high speed corners, is a bit different to Michael and Senna. Michael and Senna were chucking the car around. Those cars were much lighter back in the day, so it was much easier to throw those cars around, and actually being able to control them was a bit easier. Now with Max, with the tires and with the car being a lot heavier, you have to turn in a specific way. You can't just be super turny on the wheel and slide your tires because that will screw them up for the race. Max does this in a more smoother, but also a way to where he's still chucking the car in. He's actually braking earlier than most drivers going into corners, particularly in slow speed. So he's not taking the essential U line, which is shown on the screen, a very basic line, which typically is the normal racing line. He's not taking the V line, which is a very Sebastian Vettel type line. He's taking a mix. So he's not necessarily V'ing off the car, he's still U'ing it, but somewhere in the middle of the apex. This is because he's able to turn the car, he's braking earlier, making sure that those rears don't flare up or overheat, but braking hard in the middle of the corner, getting that front end to stick and pushing the car back, giving him a beautiful line, making him accelerate faster, but also be quicker in the corners. It's the best of both worlds if you can nail it. Now this does come with a lot of drawbacks. If you do mess up, easier to spin the car. We saw that in 2022 Hungary when he made a very small mistake. The same mistake came in a lap that I think, regardless of what happened at the end of it, will always be remembered. And I'm talking about Max Verstappen in Jeddah 2021. I mean, the lap that when I was watching, my jaw dropped. Genuinely seeing that lap and watching the onboard, which I can show some parts of in this video, it is insane to me, and it really showed where he gained the most speed on Lewis Hamilton. Now, the Red Bull car in 2021 was very much focused on slow speed and medium speed corners. With its high rake setup and really focused onto the front end, Max was very much able to take the most out of the car. In Jeddah, as you know, it's a lot of straight line. The Mercedes gained the most in the third sector, which is towards the end, and it gained a pretty good amount of time in the second sector. But what Max did was he was 2/10 down going into turns 1 and 2 and stayed 2/10 down. 3 and 4, a little bit of pace, but towards the end of sector 1 in that last twisty part, he went up on Lewis by a whole 4/10. And he was able to do this because his driving style was super adaptable in those moments, and actually braking earlier allowed him to go into the corner at a certain angle that Lewis was not able to do with his low raked car, but also the driving style that Lewis drives with. Lewis loves to drive with a little bit of understeer, and as Max said, you can't really get a fast car with understeer. Well, Lewis proves that wrong, so obviously it's all to set up and balance and feeling in the car for any driver. Verstappen tends to think that oversteer is the fastest. I, in my head, also think that oversteer is the fastest because of being able to actually move the car. In tracks like Jeddah and Spa, where there are many corners and they're very different and you have to be very adaptable, this type of style to where you're actually able to turn the car very much works for Max. If you ask him what his favorite track is, it is Spa. He loves that track, and if you've ever watched the virtual lap of him in Spa, it's a thing of beauty. I mean, if you watch the real life laps, it's another thing of beauty. Him being able to brake earlier, especially after Le Rouge and Radion, going into that next corner, he is braking earlier to chuck his car in, but at a smooth level, so not ruining the tires, in a way to where he can optimize the next corner going straight off of it. This driving style is like no one on the grid. Perez, his teammate, drives almost to the opposite of that. He drives with understeer, brakes the car a bit later, but is trying to turn the car. He is turning essentially almost on braking to make sure that he's getting that understeer under check. Max, on the other hand, doesn't have to worry about that because that is how he sets his car up. It puts him in a different league, and that's why we see Perez get dunked on with 6 to 7/10 in some qualifying laps. Now, in the race, he can come back a little bit, but is he ever catching Max? No. Because in the race, as he says, I'm driving at the best way possible. And he really is. In qualifying laps, he's chucking the car. In race laps, he's still going for that oversteer style because that is what he set the car up to, but much smoother, much more slick. Not like Schumacher or Senna back in the day. Drivers like Alex Albon and Perez have both talked about how this style of driving is almost impossible to achieve because the car is so loose on its rear end. If you ask Alex Albon, and which was asked, he said he likes to drive with a oversteery style. But the way that Max drives and how much oversteer he puts on the car, you could practically blow on the wheel and it would turn. This is how he is driving, but he's gotten so used to it that he makes it so smooth and slick. Something Albon even mentions, he says, everything looks natural for him when he's driving. It's a very clean driving style, but I know he's on the limit. And if you look at Suzuka, what he's doing in that sector 1 and 2, especially after this last weekend, it is a phenomenon. We're looking at how aggressive he's taking those, really that first sector, and really second and third, but the first being the beauty of it all. But how smooth he is in the car. You know that he is on the limit. I mean, he was a whole 7/10 up on Perez. It wasn't even a competition. And he has done this time and time and time again. And I'm not talking about just an RB19. I'm talking about the 18, the 17, and so on. This guy has just been miraculous in any car you give him. And obviously that talent and car combination is a thing of beauty. But he is what is making this Red Bull season what it is. This RB19 is the best car ever, but only because Max Verstappen has been driving it at its limit and at the pace that is not even achievable to any teammate of Max's. This is a driver and car combination that we will probably never ever see again, maybe in a long time, but insane to talk about, and I'd love to hear your thoughts down below for Max Verstappen, our probably 3-time world champion after this weekend. So let me know your thoughts down below. Please leave a like. If you haven't subscribed, please do. It would mean the world.